They are no longer just a Xero product. They are integrating into QuickBooks. Nearly 80% of firms reported an increase in revenue, and nearly 75% reported an increase in profits.
The question that we see from most people is, right, okay, it's great to talk about the technology, but how do I utilize it? How do I implement it?
3/4 of the firms are massively optimistic about the future, and 25% are just there going, we'll see how it goes.
AI is still an infant. It's now the time to bring it up with the right morals, with the right ethics, and we're not doing that. I was working with AI before AI was cool. Now it's very cool. Everyone that I say I'm the AI leader, they were like, oh wow. Back in 2020, I had to explain to people what I do. It's been a long ride, and it's only with the rise of large language models that it became so viral, so famous, and we could not even predict it, to be honest with you. The most important skill that we need to have right now is...
Hello and welcome to the Digi-Tools and Accrual World Podcast, the place to go for all your insights, news and information on the digital world of accounting in the UK and beyond. This episode is brought to you by AdSum. If you've not caught the recent Digital Digest episode, then you'll want to dive into that to find out how AdSum have released corporation tax into their open tax product and how that's helping accountants across the UK. We'll also be diving into an interview on AI with Monica Odysseos. Check that out with John Toon later. And as ever, App News bring you all the insights into what's changed recently in the UK accounting news. But before we dive into all of the detail, let's hand over to John and find out how he is, because it's just us two again today. We're remiss without Indy Tatler. After the stonking hangover she had for the last episode, we've now had Accountex, and I think she's still recovering from that.
Yeah, I think she must be. I mean, well, you know what Indy's like. She likes to go hard. So, I'm sure she'll have got the most out of Accountex that she possibly could. But as always, great. Great event. Lots of people, lots of interesting talks, lots of fascinating insights to be found from some of the vendors and some of the speakers as well, and tons of things to do. That's always the challenge with Accountex, isn't it? It's a lot of people there. It can be quite overwhelming. It's a fairly full-on couple of days. Hopefully we helped a few people on the automation station with a few ideas and thoughts, and pointed them in the right direction at the very least. That was the goal. I think we'll all be needing a little lie down for a few days just to recover, I guess.
Oh, I do. Being as old as I am nowadays, my back is particularly painful. But I think the other thing I loved about Accountex was the launch of our kind of new training platform or training scheme, which is helping those that want to launch or run a digital transformation service line in an accounting firm. We touched on that. We gave people insights into an element of what will be rolling out over the coming months. So if that is something that you're trying to do, want to grow, please do reach out to us. But we always find when we've been at a conference, we've talked to lots of people, we get a spike of new listeners. And so if you are a new listener, thank you for reaching out, listening to our podcast. We love to hear from you. So please do, at the end of this, let us know what you think. And if you want to be part of the Digital Disruptor community, drop us a message. We love to hear from you. Best way to reach out to us is on LinkedIn. But let's just jump straight into it, John. As we always do, let's jump into talking about tech and find out what's been changing over the last week or so.
Amazing. So I'm going to start off first with a little bit of research that I picked up from a group that I haven't come across before, but that doesn't mean anything really, because it doesn't mean that I've got my finger on the pulse when it comes to research. But there's a group called Credence Research who released a report on the accounting software market, particularly on the small business side of things. So looking at sort of your typical things, Xero, QuickBooks, Free Agent, Soho, et cetera, all the usual names that we're kind of familiar with. And I guess what I'm going to do, because it's quite a long thing, and they've got a very detailed research report that you can buy for excessive amounts of money because it's based in the US. But I'll summarize the main findings that they published, which I thought was really, really interesting. So they reckon that in 2024, the market valuation for the small business accounting sector was just shy of $24.5 billion US, and that their projected value for 2032, so what's that window? 8 years or 7 or 8 years is to climb to just shy of 51 billion. So just over double in size, so growing by about 10% in that time. So yeah, that's really interesting, I guess, thing to see, and I guess very exciting if you're a Xero or Intuit shareholder, for example, because you're going to see more success and more profits hopefully coming down the line. And they're sort of saying there's a lot of reasons for this growth, but in particular, probably won't surprise us, but a lot of that growth has been driven by the adoption of automation, and that obviously has an impact in terms of reducing the errors and enhancing productivity. And in particular, businesses are really focused in on automating sort of like the typical bookkeeping tasks, I guess, that we're used to, and then some of the follow-on tasks. So invoicing, payroll, but also then tax calculations and reporting out the other side. Perhaps not surprising, North America is the largest market by a fairly long way. It has about 35% of the overall market. I guess that's probably dominated by Intuit and their position there. What I thought was really interesting was that Asia Pacific comes up next at 25%. And I suspect, although there's not enough analysis detail in there to kind of get into the ribs of that, but I suspect that's possibly driven by Xero's presence in Australia and New Zealand, obviously. And then they talk about the impact of larger countries like China and India, and obviously a whole bunch of other big countries that fall into that segment that are starting to grow and expand their horizons and looking at software solutions to help with that. And clearly, there's a lot of population there in terms of headcount to change and improve the way that they go. And then Europe came in at around about 20%, and then Latin America after that. There was a real sort of interesting review of the fact that the European market had been a little bit slow to start, but was starting to pick up more and more. And then the key market drivers, which we talked about very briefly, is that, none too surprisingly, people are wanting to move to the cloud. We've talked about that lots and lots of times on the pod in terms of, how slow that can be sometimes and how we want to encourage people to do that more quickly. There's a huge opportunity around automation, and obviously the AI conversation bleeds into that in terms of being able to do more and more with that automation opportunity, but that also improves the way that you can look at your data and maybe improve the way that you go about making decisions and stuff. And then the final bit, which I think is probably particularly prescient in the UK market, given the whole NTD agenda, is that there's increasing levels of regulatory compliance requirements, which are encouraging businesses to move to utilizing accounting software to make sure that they stay compliant. And I guess you could kind of overlay that with the e-invoicing requirements that we're seeing in lots of other industries as well. So it's not just tax, but typically is. And then I guess after that, e-invoicing.
Wow. So all good for those that are investing in accounting tech, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess you flip that on its head and sort of say, well, where's the opportunity for accounting firms? Well, I guess the opportunity for us is around advising our clients, helping them to navigate this space. I mean, it's not a new opportunity necessarily, but if they're expecting this market to increase by 10% every year, then our clients are going to be fueling that. And so, isn't it better for us to serve our clients rather than maybe an IT business or someone else serving our clients and guiding them through this decision-making process?
Yeah, I'd say 10% feels small. Not for, I guess, the wider remit, but if you're a Xero, you'd be thinking, where we've been, 10% small. We want a bigger chunk than 10%. We're pushing that. But you talked about the impact for accountants, and Xero did release their accounting and bookkeeping industry report not that long ago. And I wanted to dive into some of the stats that came out of that and the impact that may have on how we project into the future and what we should be looking at. So if you've not come across one of these reports before, I know we talk about it possibly annually, but at least a few times on the pod. This is an online survey, and the 2025 report covered around 250 accountants and bookkeepers from, I guess, independent panels. So select people, and they're trying to do a spread across, large, medium, small, and sole practitioner businesses to see what the impact has been. And the biggest impact we've seen is it's been a very good year up to 2025. 80% or nearly 80% of firms reported an increase in revenue, and 75% or nearly 75% reported an increase in profits. And that's quite a big chunk. We've been through a lot of turmoil. We had those numbers closer to 50% at times. So the fact that now we're up at 75 to 8% for improving the money that we're making as firms is a big shift. And I think that I guess reflects the changes that have been going on. There's been a lot of flux regarding acquisitions, But also, one of the biggest drivers that we're seeing for firms making increased revenue is from the acquisition of new clients. And nearly 50% of firms increased their client base in that year, with only 8% decreasing. Now, obviously, generally, no one wants to be in a decreasing side unless you're scaling down. But the fact that there are constant new businesses coming in and we're constantly growing as an industry in the UK market is very impressive. And then they touch on certain things that they always like to get out there. So if you are a cloud first firm, then you are seeing a much higher level of growth, 51% compared to 38%. And if you are a Xero powered firm, then you're getting 57%. You're more likely to be growing compared to 42% that don't utilize Xero. So, big shifts there. And that's just those that use Xero. If you are a fully integrated Xero platform, then it's 70% of those are showing the biggest growth. Now, you always do wonder, is this a one-sided survey? It's hard to tell because it's run by Xero, so it's going to be putting those positive figures out there. But we do see a trend of that, whether it's Xero or Intuit. If you are a firm that, is thoroughly behind the software vendors and using that as a big area for pushing your business forward, then generally you're going to see a big improvement. And then some of the stats that go behind this is that, well, what's driving revenue, what's driving profit? And the biggest gain for revenue, I guess, not really that much of a shock, is increased number of clients. Well, kind of obvious. And then growing relationships with existing clients. Well, obviously quite obvious as well. So there's not really anything that comes out of that. But from a profit perspective, the number one change has been an increase in the number of services provided. So growing what we deliver rather than doubling down on what we're already doing. And so I think firms are now trying to expand, do more rather than, niching. And maybe that is then helping with that profit growth. And then the number one change or shift for the ability to take on new clients. So as I said earlier, you're seeing like 50% of firms that are taking on new clients. Obviously, the availability of clients is the driver of that, but you need to have the capacity to do it. And the biggest driver of the ability of that is increased efficiencies, allowing firms to serve more for the same pool of individuals in their firm, which we are seeing. It's a general trend, John, that we've been talking about for quite a while, is that balance in costs between employees, human cost and tech cost is shifting. You are reducing your employee cost and increasing your tech cost, but still at the same way of improving your profit. So yeah, some interesting stats out there. Would I say there are any massive shocks? No, but I think it's very clear now, and it has been for a while, that if you are cloud enabled, you're cloud powered, you're going to be doing bigger growth, better profitability than your competitors.
At every event and every webinar talking about AI, is that the question that we see from most people is, right, okay, it's great to talk about the technology, but how do I utilize it? How do I implement it? And I think this is one of the challenges that we constantly seeing. It's not new. We talked about this a few times, but when products like Xero came along, and QuickBooks launched the online version of their product, was that we knew what that was straight away. It's a bookkeeping and accounting system. We know how to use it. Yes, the buttons are different colors and different shapes and in different places, but it made a lot of sense to us. And the challenge around the use of, well, if we're talking about AI, the conversation's always large language models. And the challenge around using large language models is that it's not a product that you just utilize off the shelf that solves a particular problem. It's not like the apps in the Xero ecosystem where they're coming in and saying, right, we can help with your approvals, or we can help with payments, or we can help with processing documents. This is something where, as accountants and businesses in general, having to go, right, okay, well, this I can see as a great opportunity, but actually, let me now go and find a problem to solve with it. And how do I make sure that I do that effectively and efficiently? And do I have the time and the capacity and the capability and and all the other things that go with it to be able to do that, in an effective way? So, yeah, not too surprising, but we'll see more of this, and I'm sure we'll see more use cases as this level of maturity of utilizing large language models continues.
Definitely. And I guess the last bit I just wanted to pull from this report is something I'm surprised at from the questions I've had and the conversations I've had with other accountants, is that 75% of those that responded were positive and optimistic about making tax digital for income tax. And that does seem to go in the face of a lot of the other things we hear out there. Is that people are just, I guess, have been frustrated with it. It's dragged on, and then they're trying to get their heads around how they service their clients effectively. But yeah, it's 75%. I mean, that's quite a high number, and most of that seems to be from the potential to win new work. But who from? Like, if everyone's doing this, who are you winning the work from? Is it that we think every firm is so optimistic about how they're going to deliver it, they're going to steal clients from elsewhere? It's an interesting thought process around this. And maybe we've convinced ourselves, because it's been such a frustrating period, that actually this will be good. We'll make this good because we're optimistic. You said, like, one of the other stats in here is that we were optimistic about the future. There was 77%. And you can see these stats are always generally around 75 to 80%. That are positive, and maybe it's all the same firms. That 3/4 of the firms that were surveyed are massively optimistic about the future, and 25% are just there going, we'll see how it goes.
Moving on from the sublime, maybe to the ridiculous, if we're talking about mindset and technology, HMRC are looking for a new CRM, Ryan. I mean, this sounds like a cracking opportunity for you and I, maybe, to be involved in some transformative change at the tax regulator here in the UK. But they have, and I mean, look for a massive payday with this, by the way, Ryan. They have earmarked £500 million. Sorry,
yeah, good. $500,000 doesn't feel that much.
$500,000. Yeah, sorry, I forget you don't get out of bed for less than a million. So £500 million they've earmarked to move across to a new core CRM SaaS platform, and they want that to be able to manage the registration, subscription, and customer record management capabilities, effectively replacing a whole bunch of old software. And what's even better is they've earmarked another £500 million to pay someone to help them with this. So, I mean, this is just absolutely staggering, really. So this has just been launched out in the market. They've sent out what is called a preliminary market engagement notice. So effectively that allows them to scope suppliers, to provide the software. So I'm not sure who will be involved in that, but I think you can imagine all of the major, like, big CRMs and probably some of the big ERPs may well be involved in this. As always, we always know that the outcome of those implementations always ends up being terrible. So I'm sure when the Public Accounts Committee come to review this in a few years' time, we'll find that HMRC have spanked a load of money on something that didn't really work and hasn't been maybe as successful as the outcomes. So that's probably the key thing, is they've got to be able to manage this in a way that's effective, because they in our experience and the experience, look at Birmingham City Council and all others, is like, be very, very clear about what your requirements are. Be very, very clear about the fact that you should be utilizing the core functionality within a product, and don't try and bastardize the product, or don't try and tailor or tweak the product too much to your capabilities, because if you're doing that, you're just going to be locked into a world of pain and you won't get the outcomes that you want. So that's a key thing. I mean, but one of the other really, really fascinating things about this was because the Public Accounts Committee had done some research, which is included in this and sort of prompted one of the changes, is that they talked about the HMR phone service, which I think quite a lot of accountants and bookkeepers have been the victim of over the last few years. But in the first 11 months of 2024, they cut off nearly 44,000 customers who've been waiting for 70 minutes to speak to an advisor because the system couldn't cope with demand. Only 2/3 of calls were answered, and the average wait time was more than 23 minutes, which is just absolutely bonkers. And if you want an even more staggering fact or statistic from this, was that if you were phoning in for an inquiry with HMRC in the fiscal year 2023, you were on hold for a total of 798 years. I mean, that is absolutely mind-blowing. And in that fiscal period to March, so that's the year ended 2023, March 2023 is where these numbers come from. There was more than double the time wasted than in the equivalent year to 2020, which is just shows that, like, HMRC have just completely lost the plot over the last few years, and investment in technology, but also in people and skills, because there's been a whole brain drain from HMRC, is desperately required.
Yeah, I mean, look, they need a new CRM, even if it's just so that you can link one, your business in one part of HMRC to the other in an effective way. That, as a minimum, would be quite an achievement.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's $500 million, right? That's insane. Although, for context, John, what they're saying is the impact of making tax digital on businesses is $500 million for income tax. That's the increase in compliance across all the businesses that are going to be using this is $500 million. Wow! If only they could use that for some sort of, system that they could impose to make things better. But unfortunately, this doesn't go to the government. This goes to the consultants, the advisors, the accountants that will be helping those businesses. Hence, probably why 75% of firms are optimistic about making tax digital for income tax. But they've already said that from the making tax digital for VAT, because obviously they're predicting these figures, but for making tax digital for VAT, the impact's been 300 million. And those are businesses that were already mostly quite tech savvy, had a solution that really, just by turning on the filing system, enabled them to file their VAT records. And that impact was 300 million. For self-assessment, the fact that most of these businesses, or a large chunk of these businesses, wouldn't have had software to help managing their finances. Yeah, not only is the impact or a cost perspective, but the impact in disrupting exactly how they operate, their relationships with their advisors is huge. And I know that they said right at the start when they released this, that this would help overall, and that they expected that the efficiency savings to those businesses would override the increase in cost. And this does not reflect any, efficiency benefits by businesses adopting effective technology, nor the improvement to make a better profit by the increased visibility of their financial reporting. It's hard to put a figure on that, but I'd be surprised if it's $500 million across all taxpayers. So I think it's going to come across as a net cost, at least if HMRC can get a new CRM in, they can get some visibility and make some better decisions based on the information they're going to have from these schemes. That could be a positive, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, it's perhaps not surprising that there is a compliance cost as a consequence of like various, strands of MTD. I guess what we don't necessarily have in the numbers, or at least I can't do the maths in my head very quickly, is that, what's the individual impact per business? Because, obviously it sounds a lot, $500 million impact for all of these organizations, but, you've got to remember there's quite a considerable number of organizations going to be impacted. And so when you kind of, divide that up, you're going to have a relatively small impact per organization. And obviously that'll be different based on your type and your size as well, of course. Perhaps inevitable, there's going to be a cost to comply, and that cost falls on the businesses, and comes back to us probably as advisors, which can't necessarily complain because that's economic expansion and growth opportunities. If you want to dress it up as a positive, but yeah, there you go. Moving on, I've got a fundraise, an announcement from Canopy, which is a US-based practice management solution. Perhaps not that well known in the UK. I don't think they've got too much market presence here, but I've bumped into the team a couple of times on my travels and stuff. But they have raised $70 million in a Series C. And guess what, Ryan? It's going to be to help them expand their AI-driven capabilities.
What?
No, I know. Who'd have thunk it? But yeah, I mean, look, let's not be too silly here. Let's congratulate the team. I mean, 70 million Series C is pretty impressive. It's been led by Viking Global Investors, and then some of their existing investors, 10 Coves Capital, Ancona Capital, Pelion Venture Partners, and Tenea Capital. This is like a word soup. This is a challenge for you, Ryan. We're also part of the fundraise, and this is double what they raised back in May 2024. So a year on, where they raised 35 million, and they've raised another 70, and they've total fundraising to date is roughly $285 million. Which is great news for them, and you're clearly doing good things to make that to make the business investable and to continue growing as well. So There's a few bits and pieces from the CEO, from Davis Bell, who sort of said they've been talking to Viking for about a year to encourage them to invest and wanted to demonstrate the success and things. So, this is just the world that you've got to be in, I guess, when you're building software. And obviously talking to potential investors is part and parcel of what you do. I think the key thing for them is, like, one of the really interesting things I think they want to focus in on is around how do you go about that initial engagement with your clients, when you're requesting information, and sending them information as well. How do you make that as seamless as possible? Because I think that's one of the areas where AI could definitely help, but I think it's also an area which no one has managed to fix yet, in terms of that correspondence between ourselves and a client, particularly when we're requesting information, because we know that sometimes clients either can't find the information or they can be a bit unreliable, and you spend a lot of time going back and forth going, right, okay, I've asked for this, you sent me this as a response, but it's not quite what I wanted, so I'm gonna have to go back to you and then refine my request and tweak it a little bit. So I think there's some great opportunities there. And the key thing that Canopy do, let me just summarize this for you, is they serve currently about 4,500 accounting firms. They are SOC 2 compliant, so that means that their data is super secure and the platform's super secure. They particularly cover the whole client engagement piece, document management, workflow, time billing, engagements, proposals, and more. So I think these guys should be looking to the UK, because there's plenty of competition when it comes to practice management solutions here, but also plenty of opportunity, because I don't think anyone's quite nailed it yet.
No, I was thinking just that, John, is that I bet we'll be seeing them over in the UK in the not too distant future. But another bit of information on news that isn't UK focused at the moment, but will be in due course, is that Xero have partnered with BGL Workpapers. Now, you may not have heard of BGL. They're not a business that's well known in the UK, but are huge over in Australia. And what Xero effectively are doing with this is they're identifying that they need to reimagine how they do Workpapers. And rather than do that themselves, they're going to work in partnership with a leading Workpapers provider over in the Australia marketplace. Now, they focus on BGL being a leading compliance management and AI-powered paper-to-data software provider. But essentially, you're looking at a business that has built really good systems such as Cash 360 and Simple Fund 360 to help those over there and to build out their accounting compliance, and has already come over to the UK with Cash 360 very recently. So what do we expect from this? Well, obviously, they're going to focus on a single source of truth. That's something that is very critical in the way that Xero work. So going in from a working trial balance all the way through into your working papers, and then through to tax returns and financial statements. Something that has always been a bit bumpy, I think, with the current Xero Workpapers solution. So they talk also about the deeper integration into reporting and Xero tax, as well as managing the practice client records and the whole security regarding staff permissions. But then, as well as that, enhancing collaboration. So if you ever work with Workpapers, there is an approval and review process in there, but it's probably a little outdated now compared to other tools that are in the market that make it a bit more seamless. So how would we expect this to roll out? So there's a beta that's going across in the Australian market early on, so you can elect to be involved, and then that will be followed up with releases for practice in New Zealand and the UK. So they do make a specific reference to us seeing this over in the UK, and I think it's going to be important for us, John, to keep our ear to or nose to the ground with what's going on over in the Australian market, because we think that this may have a big impact over in the UK, because Xero have never really pushed the whole practice management Workpaper side that heavily. We're starting to see it a lot more with Xero tax. I think they've been a bit coy about Xero Workpapers because of what they saw and felt about the product and what feedback they probably had from the marketplace. But I'd expect this to become a lot more aggressive as a promotional side once the BGL powered Workpapers comes over to the UK.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch that for sure. Absolutely. Since we've talked about Xero, might as well talk about one of their big competitors. And QuickBooks have announced a whole bunch of updates and improvements to their sole trade product. And the key one, I think, which for me stands out at the very least, is that you've now got accountant access in the product. So it allows you to have a bit of a summary overview of your clients that are using QuickBooks Sole Trader, so that you can just manage, you navigate between them and switch between clients a little bit more quickly than you could do beforehand. They've then added some additional bank reconciliation functionality, so you can add statement balances, match transactions, and then also help to see if anything's been excluded, just so that you can review that and just make sure it's correct. So that's really important, because as we know, lots of sole trader clients tend to mix their business and personal banking together, and obviously you don't want to be including personal transactions in the MTD submissions that you would be doing in the platform going forwards. And then now you've got some additional functionality around chart of accounts and mapping, so you can add additional nominals to the chart of accounts, which you weren't able to do before, and then you can map that through so that is this a new income code or a new expense code, for example, and where that would go in the detail. And on top of that, they've now announced the ability to do some additional reporting and create work papers. So some basic reports which weren't there before, but trial balance sheet, and P&L allow you to sort of see how that sole trade business might be performing. And you've also got the ability to utilize integrated work papers, which you'll be familiar with if you're using QuickBooks already, because it's kind of there already in the side products that sit alongside this. But you've got now the ability to review work papers, attach documents, and see a bit of an audit trail of who's prepared what. And then finally, some additional things if you're in practice, just makes it easier to collaborate with your clients, because you can request information and add notes for queries or anything like that. And you can also close out work papers production and completion utilizing some of the functionality I mentioned before. So again, just helps you to keep on top of a whole bunch of things. So this is a welcome your additional functionality to QuickBooks Sole Trader. Why it wasn't there maybe in the first instance is a question to be asked, but look, it's all part of the process, I guess, as people are getting more and more used to these kind of platforms, and building on the MTD requirements that firms and their clients are having to start dealing with, particularly as we're now in this new tax year with the new betas opened up.
All very interesting. And we talked a lot about the main providers, but let's close this episode out from an app news perspective today with an X system, one that used to be owned by Xero but is now owned by BlueRock, which is WorkflowMax. They've been constantly releasing new features for their product, and there's been a whole host that have come out recently. I think mostly through March. It's a little bit outdated now, but all still quite pertinent. So they released multi-factor authentication and mandated it, and that should now be in the product. So if you I guess are utilizing WorkflowMax, should be aware of this, but if not, then please make sure that you are happy with a mandated multi-factor authentication across your system. Generally, this is, I think, probably something that's kind of the norm now. It's something we probably expect in most software, and something that John doesn't stop ranting on about anyway. So it's good that they have brought that out. They also brought in some flexibility around their invoicing, so that you can either choose to add costs back to a job, flagging it for invoicing, or to flag it as to not be invoiced. And then similarly, you can add something to a job where you want it to be included in the invoice, but not to go into costs. I can't think of a scenario that you'd want that at this point, but I guess you don't want to track it from a profitability perspective. Then that is something you've got functionality to do. On a cost by cost perspective, you can bring in notifications for any lead tracking, which I guess is something I probably would have expected to be there in the past, but must be something that was missed, because this is something that you don't want to lose sight of. You need people to be notified when there's new leads. And then you've got improved flows for the importing of Xero contacts, for handling job management, WIP management, and job financials. And then I know that they're bringing out a deeper integration with Xero over the coming months as well, beginning from April, but going through the first quarter, to improve how the invoicing approval process works and greater transparency on what has synced and what hasn't synced. So lots of work there, but the biggest one is going to be that they are no longer just a Xero product. They are integrating into QuickBooks. So you're going to have a QuickBooks integration with WorkflowMax that will work exactly the same way that Xero works. So focusing on that task, job management, and building out on the QuickBooks platform.
I was working with AI before AI was cool. Now it's very cool. Everyone that I say I'm the AI leader, they were like, oh, wow. Back in 2020, I had to explain to people what I do.
Okay, cool. I am joined today by Monica Odysseos, who I know through our connections at ICAW. We both sit on the data analytics community advisory board, which is always exciting. I mean, my involvement is way less interesting than Monica's because she's a guru and one of my most favorite people that we get to involve on the committee and stuff. So it's really cool. And I should just make sure I had to write this down because Monica's title is like super exciting and it's probably more meaningful than mine because mine's a little bit vague. But she is the AI and data lab leader at Grant Thornton in Cyprus. So Monica, delighted to have you with us. Maybe you could give us a little bit about your background and how you've kind of ended up being in this like AI leadership role.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me, for starters. And I'll give you a bit of a background because it's quite diverse how I ended up here and quite exciting of a journey. So I was always, since a child, I was always interested in many different things. So I was looking constantly to learn something else. So that gave me the diverse mindset, let's say, to explore different stuff. So I started my career with a bachelor's degree in mathematics and computer science. I started my first job after that was as a software developer, which was my favorite subject at university because of the problem-solving mindset that it wanted and that I loved. And then following 2 years after that, I did my master's degree on risk management to combine it a bit with business. And then got a job at PwC, where I started my qualification, my ACA with ICAW to become a chartered accountant, and having no idea what a chartered accountant was until that time. I had no idea what debit and credit was, so it was all new to me. It was all very exciting. I was a bit angry at first, not understanding where debit goes and where credit goes, but got the hang of it with the passing of time, and it gave me a really nice combination of business and technology that I had. So I really like that combination. So I was looking something to combine the two, and it was in 2020 that, following many positions that I had at PwC, moving through various departments, it was in 2020 that a new department called the AI team opened up in PwC, and that's when I decided I wanted to join, and which gave me that combination of advising, so business, understanding business, which I wanted to use, and the technology concept as well. So I was working there for 4 years, and it was one of the best jobs actually I had because it gave me the problem-solving stuff, but also the business mindset. And it's an industry where it's constantly developing. It's never the same. Like things I knew when I was working with a year ago do not exist now. So we are constantly reinventing ourselves. So last year, an opportunity came from Grant Thornton Cyprus to open up a new team at Grant Thornton, the AI and Data Lab. And I was called to initiate this new department, to lead this department, and created a team from scratch. And we're now 1 year in, and it's very interesting, very exciting, and we're very hopeful for the future as well.
And maybe just before we move on, I mean, just give us a little bit more detail about what the Data Lab is there for. I mean, why are GT as an organization, are clearly going to be interested in AI, right? But why are they interested in sort of setting this up as a separate team, a separate department? And what are the objectives that you're trying to achieve over the next few years with that?
Okay, so as a team, we're under advisory. So we are advising clients on how to use AI within their organization, which are the best solutions to apply, how to utilize their data to get some insights, to get a value and improve their decision making, become more efficient. And depending on the needs of each organization, we apply AI or data analytics, data science, depending on each condition. We're also involved in a lot in upskilling because I really love not teaching, but I would say training people. I really love making complicated topics simple. That's my trademark, let's say. I like making things simple. That's why I wrote many articles on what is AI really, for example. So we're a lot involved in upskilling people and organizations as well through trainings. And the reason why Grant Thornton wanted to open such a team, very good question. It's a very forward-looking organization and very focused on finding niches on the market and investing in that. So they have other teams that they invested in as well. For example, quantitative risk and cybersecurity, which are they're niche services or ESG, and they invested because they see the value and the potential in investing in such a solution. And this is what I really liked about Grant Thornton's philosophy, let's say, the investing in startup ideas and investing in niche things with a forward-looking and a vision to the future.
Amazing. Well, you're in the perfect place to keep things simple with me, Monica. So that's all good. So you like you said you kind of got into this in 2020 with PwC. So what, 5 years ago now, and I guess we constantly have this interesting battle when we talk about AI, because whenever we go to conferences and events now, the main conversation about AI is pretty much about large language models, which is really just one small branch of AI, isn't it? And I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that 5 years ago, large language models were a little bit of a pipe dream and certainly weren't the commercial sort of success that they are now. But AI back then, in terms of a conversation, probably wasn't really that much on the agenda, even though most businesses and most accountants were probably using elements of AI, maybe without realizing it. And I just wonder, do you think it is the success of the likes of ChatGPT and now a whole bunch of other models that have kind of moved the AI conversation front and center in terms of the impact?
Definitely. Well, I was working with AI before AI was cool. Now it's very cool. Everyone that I say I'm the AI leader, they were like, oh wow. Back in 2020, I had to explain to people what I do. So, and we were working with. There's a misconception of what AI is. We have many clients coming to us and saying, I want to apply AI in my organization. And what they really mean is, I want to use ChatGPT in my organization, which, yes, it is a type of AI. Unfortunately, it's not the only type of AI. AI has been existing since 1950s. So it's been a long ride. And it's only with the rise of large language models that it became so viral, so famous. And we could not even predict it, to be honest with you, because I was reading the progress of AI over the past years. And it was said that the ability of a model to communicate with natural language would be very hard to do. Most probably robots who are more helping with automation tasks, such as taking like dishes out of the dishwasher or folding our clothes, would come a lot faster than a model who will be able to communicate, because it's such a complicated thing to develop. We see now that it was the first type of AI that had such an impact on humanity. And I think there's a lot that we're going to see over the next years, and it's going to be more impactful than LLMs have been. LLMs have been life-changing for people and for organizations. We are reinventing the way we work, but over the next years, now it's the rise of the AI agents who are going to get a task and then go and follow whatever they think it's true to follow in order to achieve that goal that is given to it. We're going to see a lot of improvement and a lot of rise of reinforcement learning as well in the next years. So, and we cannot even predict. I don't believe anyone can predict where things will go. So it's only guesses that we can do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, technology predictions are by virtue of the outcomes generally a bit of a mug's game, right? Because we know if you go back over like the last 15 or 20 years of technology and accounting, at least, it's been so difficult to actually like nail down a prediction and be relatively reassured or accurate that you'll get that right. One of the things that that really impressed me when I think we were last together face to face, which was last year at one of the ICAW conferences, you did a presentation just talking about, AI, and I really like the fact that, you said that your trademark is to make things simple. And I really like the way that you explained, particularly like how large language models, have kind of come into being, and how they kind of do some of that predictive, work that allows them to have these natural language conversations and stuff. And I wonder, could you maybe just touch on that a little bit, and sort of give us some analogies about, how do these things work, and then maybe we can understand them a little bit better.
Very good question. Okay, let me think how to make this simple.
Remember who you're talking to.
So the way that these models work, it's the data that we have provided to them, whether that is data that we have online, such as Wikipedia, books, etc., the web pages, blogs, etc., and the data that we share on social media, that it was able to gather all this data. Large language models were able to gather all this data and use them to understand how we structure our sentences, how we talk, how a context is defined, and so that was the data set, let's say. So using that data set, models were trained to understand how these things work using supervised learning. And then following that, some other techniques of artificial intelligence, like supervised learning. Reinforcement learning was also applied to check which statements, to rate each statement of the models, which one performs best, in order to assess how to make this model better and better. And then it was the first, I think in 2018, 2019, no, when was it? GPT 2.5, I think, was the first one that got out. It was only for researchers. And then after that, they were building on it with more data and more reinforcement learning. And then until 2022, which they gave it access to the web. So that was then, they were able to search online for information, give you sources, not always correct. Well, we can talk about AI hallucinations as well. And yeah, that was when they became larger. And they were an interesting fun fact, if I may share, was when they asked the CEO of Google at the time, Larry Page, they asked him, why do you offer Google search for free? And I mean, what's in it for you? And he said that, well, Google search is not really what we are trying to aim. This is not our purpose. Our purpose is to build an AI. So what we're doing now is we're gathering data. So data is king. Data is the asset, the largest asset that we have in this era. And if without data, we could not build large language models. And I think that's why we saw it so much advancing in the last years. It's because the social media explosion, the connectivity between us that allowed this big data, as we call them, to be able to use this data in order to train the models, and also the improvement, the advancement of computing power, which is increasing by 30% each year. So advanced computing power gave the right foundation for LLM models to be developed.
Yeah. And you touched on hallucinations, which we've all experienced if we've played around with any of these large language models, and sometimes that can be incredibly frustrating, and sometimes it can catch you out because you don't realize. But can you sort of explain, what is an hallucination? I mean, hopefully that's self-explanatory, but why do they kind of come about? What is it particularly about these models that does create these hallucinations as a consequence of the way that they kind of work?
Well, the models, as I said, they are trained on the data they are given. So if it's not like the models are bad in returning stuff, most probably it's the data that we fed into them that are bad. And if the data, let's say that we gave ChatGPT or Gemini or an LLM to train on were biased, then the model will be biased. It's not the model per se that makes the mistakes, but the data it was fed on and the process. So what AI hallucinations are, it's when you ask something, a large language model, and it replies back with such a convincing way that you believe whatever it tells you. And even us, that we are working with AI all day, and we know the risks, and we know what might go wrong, and we know what AI hallucinations are, I found myself many times being convinced by something that ChatGPT said, going on and like redistributing that information to other people. And then when someone came back and said, well, Monica, are you sure this is right? And then I had to go and cross-check, and it was not. But it's so convincing. The way it does, it even gives you sources that I found this. Yes, I'm right. I found this here. And not even the sources are correct. They don't even exist sometimes. So the most important skill that we need to have right now is to develop our critical thinking, to be able to criticize whatever information is given to us by LLMs, and not to blindly trust it, whatever it tells us.
Yeah, and I mean, I always talk about large language models, and we use ChatGPT in our firm at the moment. But I always talk about it. It's like this, the overconfident trainee, right? They come to you and they've got an answer, and they're really like, this is 100% right, definitely right. Don't worry about it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's that critical thinking that is required to maybe sort of tear that down a little bit. But do you think that critical thinking comes with experience? I mean, let me give you an example, because we've been doing some training recently with some of our teams, and we were looking at VAT registration and stuff here in the UK, and some people got responses that had old information in there and not the current registration limits and stuff, and other people got a different response. But no one really kind of like did that sort of step back and sort of go, is that right? Am I absolutely comfortable that the source of information is reliable and that what I'm getting is right? So do you think there is an element of this comes from your professional experience as well?
Definitely. Knowing how to research also really helps. So knowing how to cross-check information. What I've really found that it's useful, it's you don't trust the context, you trust the source of the context. So if ChatGPT tells me that I found this information and it's true because I found it from theonionnews.com whatever, then I'll be like, the Onion News, really? Okay. Whereas if it tells me, I found this in Washington Post and New York Times and The Economist, etc., then I would say, okay, yeah, let's check the sources if they actually say that, because I do trust the source and not the context of it.
Yeah. And is there a challenge around sources? Because I mean, obviously now there's a challenge with the access to copyrighted information, and obviously that's become a huge topic of the last few months, or even probably more so. But as you say, the models rely on the data that's input into them, and as these models try to gain more and more broad access to more information, some of that does sit behind paywalls, or some of that is copyrighted, and so having access to really accurate and reliable data is a bit of a challenge, isn't there? How do you think we're going to overcome that?
Very good question. I don't have the answer to that, and I think no one has the answer to that, to be honest with you. We should have the answer for that for sure. I mean, I think there's a lawsuit also from a publishing company to an LLM using their articles to provide information. I mean, not only for publishing companies, not only for context on news, but even there was a huge debate going on in the last month about the image generation, the new model of ChatGPT, creating image, and it became very viral to create your image on Ghibli style.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure if you did it. I did it. I'm part of the problem. But people were going and using and creating image in the style of an artist who should have their IP rights protected, but because things are moving so fast and regulation is moving a lot slower, we don't have an answer to that, and we don't have an answer to we cannot protect writers, we cannot protect content creators, we cannot protect artists, because all this information is used by LLMs and providing an output, and it's not paying back the original creators of that.
Yeah.
Which is going to prove a larger problem than we think in the next year, because no one would want to go into these fields if they are not protected by regulations.
I mean, that is an interesting conundrum, I guess. Is like we always see that legal regulation always comes after the fact, particularly when it comes to technology, because it's always a bit challenging, like say, to kind of predict where things are going to go. I mean, we'll not dwell on that too often, but I mean, I guess in that kind of Ghibli example, I guess if I cast my mind back before ChatGPT came along, we've always had people who would copy other people's art or copy people's styles and things like that. And that has been protected in various ways because we've got IP protections and other things that do sit around that. Equally, a Ghibli original will sell for way more than a copy would ever do. And so the key thing is being able to identify, is that an original or is that a copy? And hopefully at the moment, at least with the whole ChatGPT thing, it's fairly obvious where it is being generated by ChatGPT. I guess the conversation here then moves us on a little bit to sort of like thinking about ethics and we're both ICAW members as well. So I know they're really hot on ethics and the impact on the profession. But can you sort of talk around what are the challenges, particularly for accountants, bookkeepers, maybe who want to make more use of ChatGPT or something similar? What implications do we need to consider as a consequence?
Well, the regulation is the most important thing for humanity at this moment, the regulation of AI. Unfortunately, we are moving too slow and we're not moving all together. I think that's a larger issue than we're moving slow because we all have to agree between us on how to regulate AI. I mean, if the European Union is the first one that applied the regulation, they firstly established AI Act, but the European Union is the only one that applied the regulation until now. And it will have no impact if the rest of the world decides that I'm not going to apply regulation because I'm going to be left behind and I won't have innovation within my country to develop AI because regulation would take me back. So it does nothing by just one institution applying regulation. We all have to come together and agree on something. And I'm sure you understand how hard that is. It never happened in the past of history, unfortunately. And we would need to definitely find a way because AI is still an infant and it's now the time to bring it up with the right morals, with the right ethics. And we're not doing that. We're leaving it to learn out of public data, which may be wrong, may be biased, and maybe it will be brought up to become unethical and harm us in a way, possibly in the future.
And we have seen that, haven't we? We've seen some models having to be pulled, and obviously ChatGPT have just made an update or rolled back an update because their model was too sycophantic and kind of gave you praise around potentially making unethical decisions in some instances. But whose responsibility is that? Because I mean, I guess I can understand the kind of the moral debate between regulation versus innovation. I don't think actually there's ever been a time where regulation has inhibited innovation, because I think innovators always innovate irrespective of the frameworks they've got to work in. But who's got to be responsible for feeding information and saying this is reliable and this isn't reliable? I mean, we saw this challenge a few years ago when I think was it Google were labeling news sites as being reliable on that, and there was a huge amount of pushback on that to the point where it got completely quashed. I mean, are we going to have to establish some new societal norms to allow this to happen?
Again, no answer for that, but we can brainstorm if you want. I mean, it's all new. It's all new to me. It's all new to you. It's all new to humanity in general. We don't have the answer of who should be responsible. And it's one of the questions about when countries trying to set up their own regulation, one of the questions is whose responsibility, who should be accountable for the outcome of these models. I mean, if I try to trick ChatGPT to give me something unethical as an answer, and I've managed to do it, is that my responsibility? Is that the model's responsibility and the programmers behind that designed it and allowed it to do that? Is that the data's responsibility? Where did we find the data? So it's a very hard question to answer. And I do not have, I'm sorry about that, I do not have an answer. But I do agree with the question. And I believe it's very important that we answer that question. Who should be responsible for the good outcome? Because we do want a good outcome and not a non-harmful outcome for all LLMs.
Yeah, I always think, I mean, I think this, this LLM debate in particular that we're having recently really highlights the kind of tech fallacy that we see in society in general. And you can reflect this onto something else, which is like the self-driving cars, thing at the moment where, I don't know if you've heard this, Monica, but basically people expect self-driving cars to never have accidents because it's technology, so it should be perfect. And then obviously they do have accidents occasionally, and more often than not, the accidents that they've had have been caused by the human being in the vehicle not paying attention, or it's not been trained on the right information or whatever. And it's always a human failing, not a technology failing that's arisen more often than not. And yet, like I say, we expect it to be perfect, and we're still having the same debate now. It's like, who's responsible for the accident? In terms of who's insuring this thing? Who is it? The manufacturer that should be responsible? Is it the person in the vehicle that's responsible? And we still don't have answers there, do we? Moving on then. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, if I may add about that, no, we don't. What the AI Act did, the European regulation on AI, they asked for high risk models, AI models that fall under the category of high risk, to have a human oversight. So a human, a person, to be able to validate that the outcome of the AI, the decision, is validated by a human. So it's adding, in a way, responsibility back to the human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I guess kind of makes sense, right? In the grand scheme of things. And I think particularly in a professional services world, if I think about the things that we're responsible for when we provide our professional services, we're providing an opinion, or we're signing an audit report, or signing an accounts report, or something else. It always falls back to the individual to apply their own judgment. But I guess moving on from that, and conscious of time as well, is that we talked about capability of these models, and we talked about skills and things like that. And one of the things that I read fairly recently sort of said that the task capability of large language models is doubling in capability every 7 months. And you talked about agentic AI, which is really the big hot topic that we're seeing at the moment. But what is the conceivable risk, or what is the real issue for not just professionals but other people in business around skills? I read LinkedIn provided an article which touched on the fact that they expect 70% of skills currently in use by people working in an office environment or professional environment to be gone in the next 5 years as a consequence of AI. So there's some big impacts that we've got to consider, right?
Yes, and it is predicted. I mean, jobs have been changing throughout time. Mm-hmm. So jobs that we had like 100 years ago do not exist now. I mean, a horse changing thing, something, whatever, does not exist now. My job did not exist like 10 years ago as well. So jobs have been reinvented throughout time. So that's not an issue, because we are able to reinvent ourselves anyway. What it is predicted, however, is the speed that is going to happen now. We are expected to reinvent ourselves, to change positions 5 times during our lifetime, because of the rate of change that things are we're going to be seeing in the next years. So the skill that we need to build is to constantly learn and not be found my job now, gonna sit back, everything's perfect, because things are going to be moving whether you like it or not. So the most important skill is to be adaptable, to be able to constantly learn and adapt to new situations, and not be afraid of change.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, I love that. I mean, I love the fact that, we're talking about when you made your introduction, you talked about the fact that you were curious and you were interested in the opportunities and the things that fascinated you, and you were trying to find somewhere that kind of allowed you to express yourself and express that curiosity and interest. And now, of course, we're talking about being adaptable and being able to change, and all of these key skills. I mean, I wonder if are these key skills, or are these traits? Are these things that you can learn, or do you just have them in naturally?
You can definitely develop. I mean, some are inherent. I mean, I was fighting with my mom when I was a child, because I was taking up a hobby, and then after a month I was like, I'm bored now of playing the guitar. I want to learn something else. So she was like, no, you need to stick to something. You need to learn this thing and become good at it. But I was always trying to learn something new. So I believe I was born with this curiosity and these fast changing things, which in another decade might not benefit me so much, but now it I match with the time, so that's good for me. But you can definitely develop it. There's lots of things you can do. We now have more information than humans have ever information. If I remember the largest, do you know the Library of Alexandria?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was the largest library. It was the largest source of information that people had at the time. Now this thing that we're holding, our phone, holds more information than that library than people had access to information. So we do have the information. You can read. You can watch YouTube videos, you can watch series, you can see podcasts, you have the information in all formats, and whatever suits you, you should be constantly learning and constantly following what's going on. Not specifically about technology on how AI is moving, but specifically for your industry, in the industry that you're interested in. Let's say I'm an artist, then let's say I'm a painter, then you constantly need to learn what's the updates, what's going on with painting. Well, how should I reinvent myself? Should I learn about what NFTs are? Should I find out how I'm going to be sustainable in the future? So whatever industry you're doing, AI is going to impact that industry. So you need to be in front of the game and not following behind. So that's really important.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Monica, for your time. I think we could probably talk about this for like 3 or 4 hours, if not longer.
Definitely.
And maybe we'll just get you back on another point, and we'll talk a bit more about this. Or when we get to the doomsday scenario where no accountants are left, and we can reflect on who's left standing and what roles are still working for us. But thank you very much for your time. It's always great to speak to you, Monica, and no doubt I'll catch you on the next ICW meeting. But beforehand, if anyone wants to get hold of you, what's the easiest way to contact you if they want to learn more or maybe get a bit more involved in what you're doing out in Cyprus?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn, which I usually reply fast enough. And we can take it from there if you're interested to talk to me about AI and talk to me about how we should apply ethics on AI.
Amazing. Okay, thank you very much, Monica. That was awesome.
Thank you, John.
And that brings us to another end of our podcast. So thank you for listening. If you didn't manage to catch us at Accountex, then look, be aware we're going to be bringing other events to your ears, and we'll make some notifications about that, some releases, some announcements about that in the coming weeks and months. But we do always like to hear from you. Please do reach out to us if you've got any comments, queries, or just to make us aware of your product and what it's been doing. We like to keep our ear to the ground. We like to make sure that we are at the forefront of all technology so that we can inform you and make sure that you know what's going on out there. Please do like, follow, and also leave a review. We like to hear your thoughts and feelings and any improvements we can make to what we're doing. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening.